All right, Duff McDuffie, great to have you here. You help
Be here.
people overcome their productivity problems
Yeah,
through
that's my
breathing
specialty these
exercises,
days.
hypnosis, things like that. So I guess we can start. You can just tell a little bit about how you help people and how you got into this.
Yeah. So, I'm a certified professional hypnotist and a hypnotic coach, and got a bunch of NLP trainings, neuro linguistic programming. And how do you get into that? That's a pretty weird thing to get into when it really comes down to it. How do you get into hypnosis? Well, really, what it comes down to is I had a lot of my own challenges. Like I know you, Luke, you got into the slow breathing through your own anxiety and trying to figure out a way to solve that. Similar situation for me. I had a lot of anxiety. For 25 years, I'd say I'd had anxiety. And it was a sort of a constant companion. You might call that generalized anxiety, right? There was always like at least a 5 out of 10, level of anxiety in my system. But also had social anxiety, like in a really bad way. Didn't know growing up that part of the reason for that is I'm on the autism spectrum. I'm autistic. And now there's all this more awareness around neurodiversity and what that all means. But at the time, I just thought I was a weirdo, a geek, a nerd, right? In high school, my friends and I, we all played Dungeons and Dragons, and we had LAN parties back before the internet. And we did
on
nerdy
an Xbox
stuff.
Or what kind of LAN? Oh, computer LANs.
Oh no, like literal, tower computers and plug them together and stuff. Yeah, and played Magic the Gathering, and of course, people still do these things, which is fantastic. I love to see that nerd culture has become so mainstream. But we were not mainstream. We were not cool. And a lot of us were, because we're different. We got bullied, not necessarily in high school, but before that, I got really bullied in middle school and stuff. And it really gave me kind of like post-traumatic stress and social anxiety and just general anxiety and all this stuff. Felt like there's something wrong with me, right? I need to fix that. And so that's where I went. I went inward. I started trying to figure out like, what is the solution to my own problems? And I started trying a bunch of different things. In college, I found this book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy, which is an old book on cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
Amazing book.
Amazing book. Nowadays, those same things are in apps, right? There's lots of cognitive behavioral therapy apps. It's actually really helpful to get, clear thinking when you're feeling terrible, right? When we're feeling bad, we tend to go to all or nothing thinking, like everything sucks, or I'm never going to figure this out, or these sorts of universal generalizations, what we call them in NLP. Not helpful. So my mind was doing that a lot as I felt terrible, had very, negative thinking. And so cognitive behavioral therapy was helping to get clear thinking, which was really good. But what I noticed is I became more rational about my situation, but I didn't necessarily feel any better in my body. Like I could have an 8 out of 10 anxiety going on in my body and being like, okay, I know I'm safe. I don't feel safe. I feel terrible. Right.
Yeah, this is exactly what I went through too. Same process.
Right. Yeah, I think we're not alone here. I think other people maybe experience this, but so cognitive behavioral therapy was really helpful. I did some with a therapist. I did a lot of myself because I was a broke college student. So I was reading these books and I was a philosophy major, and I was like, okay, I can analyze thought. I know how to do that. So that was helpful at the time, but it was still so heady. Right? It was still like frontal lobes, conscious mind, call it in hypnosis. And then somebody actually gave me a book in college. He was like, I've got this book. He was like all mysterious about it. It's very weird. And I'm like, what is it? He's like, it's on self-hypnosis. And I was like, oh, what is that? That sounds very strange. I don't know if I believe in that. He's like, oh, you got to read this book. It's amazing. And so I started reading the book and trying to apply some of the self-hypnosis techniques. So you sort of guide yourself into a relaxed state, count down from 10 to 1, with each number going deeper and deeper into trance, that sort of thing. Trying to do it on myself. And I was getting okay results. I found actually that I could, if I really slowed it down, I could sort of put body parts to sleep, which was weird. Like my feet would kind of be bouncing around all the time because I had lots of anxiety and I'd be fidgety, right? And that was a constant thing going on. But like in class when I was bored, or actually I had a lot of friends in the music school where I went to Lawrence University. So I'd be sitting in a lot of their senior recitals, be an hour or two of a cello recital or something. I'd be like, okay, more cello music. I'd be a little bit bored. We didn't have cell phones, smartphones to play video games while you're listening to your friend's recital at the time. So I would try to hypnotize my feet, like get them stuck to the ground, make them feel warm and heavy just with my imagination, just with self-suggestion. My feet are warm and heavy, this sort of thing. And by an hour into the concert, I was like, whoa, I feel like I took a pill or something. I feel very relaxed. And so I started to learn that I could control aspects of my autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight response, through imagination and self-suggestion. And that was pretty profound. That was pretty interesting. So much later, when I graduated college, I was kind of on my own. I was getting interested in meditation for a similar reason. I was like, maybe there's something in meditation that could be helpful for me. And I had this friend who had done these very intense 10-day meditation retreats called Vipassana retreats. And they're silent meditation. You don't talk to anybody for the whole time. You just meditate by yourself for like 10 or 11 hours a day. And they're so intense, but they're donation only. And I was a broke 20-something. So I was like, sure, I'll go on one of these crazy intense meditation retreats. I'd only done, maybe an hour at a time max. Like that was a long meditation for me before I went.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I was not prepared. It was very intense. A lot of knee pain, a lot of back pain. And I was like cursing my friend in my head, like, what did you put me into here? This is, I want to leave, I didn't drive there, so I can't leave. But I made it through those hard moments. And there were brief moments on the meditation retreat where I was like, okay, I'm getting some peace in my mind, some little more relaxation in my body. I was doing something actually very similar when I was putting my feet to sleep. I was kind of putting my limbs to sleep so I could stay still and try to relax. Didn't always work. There was a lot going on inside still, a lot of anxiety. But through that Vipassana meditation, which is like a body scan, like feeling your head all the way down to your toes and back up.
I'd like to take a quick break to tell you about my new app, Pocket Breath Coach. Pocket Breath Coach helps people relieve anxiety with slow breathing exercises. Slow, deep breathing has been shown in multiple studies to relieve anxiety, lower blood pressure, and help people fall asleep. And it even helped me to overcome my own severe anxiety. Pocket Breath Coach comes loaded with lots of breathing exercises that have helped people to relieve anxiety, such as box breathing and 4-7-8. But you can also customize the exercises. So if an exercise feels too slow or too fast, you can adjust it to suit your needs. You can also select your favorite sounds and animations to choose the ones that help you feel the most relaxed. It has a sleep timer so you can drift off to sleep while listening to the calming guided breathing. It's free to download for Android and Apple devices. You can find the link to it in the podcast show notes or go to pocketbreathcoach.com. Now, back to the interview.
Through that, I started to be able to relax even though I had anxiety going on. So the cognitive behavioral therapy made me, I was rational while I felt anxious. And then the body scan helped me to notice those sensations and kind of detach from them, not react to them, right? Or stay kind of relaxed even as I was noticing them. That was a huge improvement. But there was still a lot of anxiety going on. So like sometimes I could sit and be very calm looking from the outside. No one in a million years would know I was anxious, but I was like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 of anxiety in that moment. So super cool power to have, to be able to not react to those thoughts and feelings inside. And there was still a missing piece for me. So I could get really relaxed through the body scan, through the self-hypnosis. But then I started looking for, is there a way to transform the actual automatic reactions? There's got to be, right? Because I learned in college, I took Psych 101. We learned that you can train dogs to drool on command. That's what Pavlov did. Rang a bell, gave the dog some food. They ate it. Rang the bell, gave the dogs food, ate it, until he could just ring the bell and the dogs would drool. Because he was studying digestion, actually. He wasn't studying psychology at the time. But he learned.
Oh, I didn't know that. He was studying digestion.
Yeah, he was studying animal digestion. And it taught us a lot about how brains work, though. Not just dog brains, but human brains. And he didn't have to teach the dogs how to challenge their irrational thoughts, or to meditate on the sensation of breathing as they're panting. Like he didn't have to do that, right? Those are great tools that we can use as human beings, but dogs, they still learn things. They still were able to learn new automatic responses without any of that. So I was like, okay, there's got to be a way. And within hypnosis, I started studying more about that. And I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, which really overlaps with hypnosis. They're just both ways to get at these unconscious automatic responses that we have using imagination primarily. Which doesn't seem like it would work. Like imagination, how could that work? But like if you're going to train a dog to drool on command, you got to do it externally. You got to do it with an external cue, like a bell or a flashing light, and then associate it with something. But the cool thing about humans is we can communicate with each other and tell each other our subjective experiences, and we can also use our imagination, so we can link things up in imagination. So for instance, one of the things hypnotists do that's really cool is we train people to go into relaxed states like that, like real quickly. Actually, this is used for entertainment purposes mostly, because most people, they know about hypnosis because they went to a hypnosis show once in Las Vegas, or in high school at the after prom, there was a hypnotist that came up and hypnotized all their friends to act like chickens or dance when there's no music or whatever.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of those.
Yeah, stage hypnosis, they call that. Entertainment hypnosis. Now there's street hypnotists who do the same thing. They'll go in a street corner and say, hey, you want to experience something weird? And they'll flip people into trance. So those are cool, but that's not what a hypnotist like me does with a client. I know my clients will come in and say, I want to be a chicken, right? They say, I want to not, I want to be more confident.
Yeah.
So I don't turn people into chickens. But, so it's not that entertaining to watch someone slowly and gently guide someone into trance over 30 minutes. You can do that. That's a great way to do it, actually, like a guided hypnosis or guided meditation, or even slow breathing exercise. Like you say, Luke, often like 20 minutes is better than 2 minutes for most people. I completely agree. That's my experience too. But to be more entertaining, hypnotists will often do that first as a stage hypnosis thing, 10 or 20 minutes. They'll hypnotize the whole audience, bring people out, and then figure out which people look like they really went into trance in the audience because they're slumped over like this. They'll say, you come onto stage, you come onto stage. And then they will train people to go into hypnosis very quickly through associating a cue with a response, right? So if this, then that, like in computer programming, actually. So one of the classic ones is they'll put people into relaxing trance first, and then they'll say, in a moment, I'll count up from 1 to 5. When I say 5, you open your eyes wide awake back in the room. Here's what's going to happen after that. Then I'm going to point at you and say, sleep. And when I point at you and say, sleep, you'll close your eyes and immediately go back into a deep, relaxing trance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, eyes open, wide awake, sleep. Right. So they just tell people what to do and train this, but they do it over and over and over again throughout their act in funny ways. So they'll have somebody do something ridiculous and then say sleep. And they do this over and over. So what they're really training is this if-then. This, if this happens, then immediately do that. If this happens, immediately do that. Which is already how our brains work. It's already how our brains work. So someone who has public speaking anxiety, for instance, they get up in front of a group, they see people's eyes, and that's the cue. Feel anxious. But it can actually happen even earlier because they're imagining it in their mind. So just even the picture of that makes them feel anxious. Whereas somebody who doesn't feel anxious, they might imagine standing up in front of a group and looking at one person and talking to them. And that person's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm getting what you're saying. That doesn't make you feel anxious if someone's listening and interested in what you have to say and everyone else is kind of in the background, right? So the way we picture things in our minds creates the experience. That's the same idea in cognitive behavioral therapy, but they don't have the same understanding of what's going on in our mind. In CBT, it's like, it's what you say to yourself. You say this phrase, you say, everything's going to go terrible. It's all self-talk. Self-talk is part of it. Self-talk's part of our inner experience. What I loved about hypnosis and NLP, they were like, no, that's just a tiny little aspect of your whole imagination. Self-talk is imaginary. It's not real. No one actually talking to you. You don't, unless you believe the voices in your head are really coming from somewhere else. Then you got a different problem.
Yeah.
But it's totally normal to have self-talk or imagination, and to have that be going on all of the time, as anyone who's meditated will know, unless maybe you do some deep breathing through Luke's app and get your mind quiet for a little while. But for the most part, we got stuff going on all the time, chattering in the background, yada, 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 or pictures in our minds. And it's that imaginary stuff, that inner talk and those pictures, but the whole experience that creates our emotions and creates our beliefs really about the world. So as I got into that stuff, it really gave me so many more tools to work with. And then there were certain tools that really started to make changes for me. Now, this is a long journey, right? Before I really started to have some changes. But I found some things in NLP and hypnosis that actually started to resolve my anxiety, not just make me more aware of it and more calm with it or more rational while I was anxious. But the anxiety level, my baseline level started to go down and down and down and down until it was like, oh, there are moments when I'm not anxious at all. That's crazy. And then it would come back, an hour later or 5 minutes later, whatever. And then I would do more and it would go down even more. And then I was like, I wonder what it'd be like to go a whole day without anxiety. Is that even possible? And then I had a day like that. I was like, whoa, I forgot to get anxious yesterday. That was so cool. Right?
Yeah.
And I started having more and more of that. And it's not that I'm incapable of feeling anxious or depressed or miserable or whatever. But my baseline is mostly calm now. And that is just a whole nother life for me than my first 20, 30 years of life. And now I'm 43, almost 44. And it's been over a decade where that's kind of been my baseline. There's been times that are a little more stressful, of course. Stuff's going on. Beginning of the pandemic, first month or so, I was like, freaking out. And then I actually used the tools that I've been practicing for 20 years and was able to address some of that. It doesn't really matter where anyone is, right? Like, I don't say this to like make people feel bad if they feel anxious or depressed. Like that is, or whatever, stressed in whatever way. It's not about comparison. It's just about seeing that it's possible to make some progress there.
Yeah. And so from the first time when you were talking about relaxing your feet, or let's say from when you first started, when you read Feeling Good to that point where you went a whole day.
20. Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
then you
that
finally
was
went a whole day
a
without
decade.
feeling anxious. A decade. So
yeah. That wasn't a fast process for me.
Yeah.
Now, with
and I
the
think
right
that's
tools,
realistic.
I think it can go. Yeah. I mean, with the right tools, I think people can make faster progress. But it's okay. Like, it's okay if it's a journey that takes a decade too. I mean, that's just. Yeah, I was especially complex. I don't want to say that it's going to take a decade for everybody. But like, I know it's funny because NLP and hypnosis in particular, the marketing around this is like, oh, it's going to quick change just like that. And you're going to feel better. And that's why I was actually drawn to it. I'm like, oh yeah, I want the fastest, best stuff.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was drawn to it for that too.
Again and again and again. Yeah. I used the best tools that exist, and it still took years and years.
Yeah. It's funny because I went through, and this is probably just the common experience, but I went through the same thing where started realizing I had some problems with anxiety, couldn't focus at work, wasn't getting great sleep, started getting into different things, got into, probably the earliest stuff I got into was maybe even like law of attraction stuff, like making vision boards and all that, and
ask, believe, receive. That's all you have to do, Luke.
Visualizing the goal, which visualization, that's part of the imagination. That's maybe helpful, but
it can be. Yeah, it's definitely part of the whole puzzle.
But there was something else going on, so then I went down other routes, started getting into meditation, which helpful. Definitely glad I did as much meditating as I did.
Yeah.
But it didn't kind of deal with those deep down problems. And then later on, started getting help, did some cognitive behavioral therapy, figured out my thinking patterns, but was still feeling Just still having panic attacks all the time, basically,
Right.
and breaking into a sweat because I thought I lost my keys, but they were actually in my pocket, stuff like
Totally,
that. And
right?
eventually, just I'd say it was probably maybe 5 years for me to get to there. But once I kind of knew the things that worked for me, it was more like 3 or 4 months till I went from
Wow.
pretty bad anxiety to having those days where I was like, wow, I didn't feel anxious at all today. And then at one point I was like, I can't remember the last time I broke into a sweat because I thought I lost my keys. So
right?
Those were the kind of things that were breakthroughs for me at the time.
That's awesome.
So talking about things like NLP. So there's kind of like the Tony Robbins side of things, where maybe it's a little overhyped.
Little would be putting it very mildly.
And then there's the real science of it, because it is a psychology. So can you tell a little bit more about what NLP is?
Sure. Yeah. The funny thing is, I originally got into NLP through Tony Robbins because I didn't know what NLP was. I didn't even know he was doing NLP. In fact, he learned NLP when he was in his early 20s, I believe, or maybe even late teens. And then immediately started teaching it, while he's in the training, and then eventually renamed it because of he didn't want to be trademark copyright or something. I don't know, but he changed his to NAC, neuroassociative conditioning. So there's actually some good stuff in Tony Robbins, but man, he's definitely overhyping is putting it very mildly, and also there's an aggressive element to Tony Robbins stuff. I saw his sales pitch in person in a Unleash the Power Within workshop where you walk across burning hot coals the first night. And then the second day you do all this stuff, and it's like 15 hours long each day. It's exhausting. And there's lots of jumping up and down and screaming to rock music.
Really. I've seen some clips. I've never been to one, but I've definitely seen clips of the Unleash the Power Within.
It's the power within is mania. That's what you're really unleashing within. It's intense. But then his sales pitch was the most manipulative, pushy sales pitch I've ever seen in my life, before or since. It was like 3 hours long, and oh man, it was so bad for his Mastery University, which is more the same. So anyway, there's a baby in that bathwater, but the bathwater is real dirty. And the baby,
that's a nice analogy.
Yeah. And the baby to me is the original NLP stuff, which is actually really good, especially filtered through certain people. So I actually still do some marketing for Andreas NLP, a particular school of NLP that Steve and Connie Ray Andreas were responsible for. So they are out here in Boulder, Colorado. And years ago, they would host trainings with the original Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And, they wrote some of the initial books on NLP based on transcripts. But Steve was a chemist. He had a master's degree in chemistry and was really interested in psychology. And Connie Ray got a PhD in psychology. So they have a science bent, and they're both oriented towards therapy and parenting, sort of like the Jedi approach to NLP. Whereas there's some people in NLP who are like, let's use this to sell used cars and pick up ladies. And not that there's anything wrong with selling used cars or seducing people, but they tend to be more of the Sith school of NLP. Ethics be damned. Let's just get what I want. So anyone learning NLP should know that there are some different kinds of people in the community, and some have a stronger moral compass than others. But the Andreases are some of the nicest people on the planet. Steve has passed along. He was old, and I worked for him when he was, heading towards that. But Connie Ray's still around doing her thing, and their approach is just so gentle, so kind. Like really incorporates self-compassion to the max, or in working with someone else, like really, caring deeply about the person you're coaching or helping. And so I was really that was a healing balm after being in the Tony Robbins school for a little while, because I was really pushing myself hard, Tony Robbins style, and that burned me out really hard actually in my 20s. I was listening to that, and I started a business with some friends, a podcasting business actually, before anyone knew what a podcast was, because the first iPhone came out actually while we were running this big business. So we were way too early to market. And so we raised some money from a rich friend, $500,000, spent it all, didn't make any money within about 9 months. That was an exciting run. But from that and from Tony Robbins and from just burning the candle at both ends and anxiety and all that stuff, I hit a wall, and I had chronic fatigue at that time. And I really needed something different. And I found something from Connie Ray Andreas and her sister Tamara Andreas called Core Transformation. And that is an amazing healing method. So Core Transformation starts with the idea that we have these different parts of ourselves. And sometimes those are in conflict. Like part of me wants to do this thing and part of me wants to not do that thing, right? Procrastination in a nutshell, or any sort of inner conflict. So, and these parts of us, they're kind of like running on automatic pilot in the background. So I'll tell my clients things like, you don't have to put this on your to-do list to remember to get anxious, or, no, of course not, right? It just happens automatically. So that's where the hypnosis comes in. We're trying to change unconscious automatic behaviors. But instead of trying to override these parts of us, make them wrong or bad, cut them out, destroy them, smash them into bits, which is kind of Tony Robbins' approach to NLP sometimes. And many people just experience like, this is bad. I need to get rid of this procrastination or this anxiety. Bad part of me. Spank it. That doesn't work. Because it's still there. It's still part of you. It's like trying to cut off your arm to quit smoking. It's like there's going to be some cost there. Right?
And you can find another way to smoke probably. So
yeah, right. Yeah, you'd be like, can you help me? Ask people on the street. But yeah, so instead of making parts of us wrong or bad, unconscious parts that are doing stuff we don't like, we approach them with compassion and love and a sense of, believing that there's got to be a positive reason for this. There's got to be a positive reason this part of me is making me anxious in a social situation, or it's part of me making me procrastinate, or whatever it is. And then getting to know that part of you by assuming positive intention, which is how we'd resolve any conflict with another person if we wanted to do that too. And asking this part of you, what do you want? Like, what are you really wanting through this? And then what are you wanting through that that's even deeper, like getting to deeper layers. So anyway, you go through this whole process. It's actually a profound healing experience. Some people call spiritual, even if you don't have any spiritual beliefs, like similar, like if you take 3 or 4 grams of psychedelic mushrooms, you'll have a spiritual experience, whether or not you're an atheist, It's a similar kind of thing, but maybe not quite as intense or long lasting. It was like 5 hours at a time. But there's a similar, like, profound healing that happens through this. And so, like, I started doing this from the book. It took me still like 20 tries to get to what we call a core state in that experience. It could be like peace or being or universal love or stuff that sounds so cheesy, intellectually, but the experience of it is like, wow, like this is amazing. But then I started just doing that technique over and over again. That was one of the key things for me in getting over anxiety and depression. And it was really healing. And I think one of the big reasons is because when you get to those core states, like the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, it's just offline in those moments. And so you get these moments of relief, like, similar, I think, in the breath work, like, you do enough of it and you get these moments of just like, oh, there's no stress happening right now. Which is how, the fight or flight response, it's evolved for short-term situations. There's a tiger, there's a lion, you see it, it's chasing after you. Okay, you lost it. Whew. Now it's time to chill out again. But in modern society, we get that turned on, just get stuck. The alarm gets stuck in the on position. And so when we have these moments where it's just completely off, however we get there, that to me is the beginning of that freedom from anxiety or suffering, or whatever you want to call it.
And so that's that's interesting, because just starting from talking about the Tony Robbins side of NLP, where it's almost sounds like his approach is the opposite of what you just described, where he's And some of his books were helpful for me in the beginning. But yeah, it was more about kind of hyping yourself up. And
Yes.
honestly, that's, I guess it's that same thing we were talking about. You're not really addressing the core of what's going on. You can hype yourself up for a little bit by doing some jumping jacks and
make your power move. It's like make your move. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Yeah, that works for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. But it's literally fight or flight response. Like it's literally just sympathetic nervous system arousal.
Yeah, you're using the fight or flight instead of balancing it out with the parasympathetic response. And and I'd say, that's super relatable to me. Have you done any like HRV biofeedback or any of that?
Yeah, a little bit with with like what's that one device from HeartMath or something?
Yeah, the HeartMath Inner Balance is the one I've used.
I got the one that clips onto the ear and goes into the iOS device and stuff. I thought that was kind of interesting. Although I figured out how to hack it. by breathing with my heart rate, actually. So like I breathed in for 6 heartbeats and breathed out for 6 heartbeats. I got better response in their app than if I did, basically loving kindness meditation, which they instruct you to do. I thought that was fascinating. But anyway, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it just made what you were saying just remind me a lot of learning that, where instead of like you're in this fight or flight state and it's more about trying to balance it out. You don't have to like completely eliminate it. Yeah. And you don't have to rely on it to get things done. You can actually just balance it out to where you feel kind of normal.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think a lot of people, so this gets back to my current coaching niche, which is mostly helping people with productivity problems, especially creative neurodivergent people with ADHD or autism spectrum or so on, or think they might be that way. A lot of my clients don't have a diagnosis, but they're like, I wonder if I'm a little ADHD sometimes. It kind of feels that way. I've been watching these TikTok videos or whatever. It seems like me. And that's obviously not being diagnosed, but there's a lot of overlap. So anyway, I help people with that. And one of the things I see a lot is that those of us who are struggling with either procrastination or burnout or focus or, imposter syndrome and these kinds of things, usually what we have been trying to do is push and force and use stress to get things done, like hype yourself up or drink extra coffee or, these sorts of things. It's not that you can't do it that way. You certainly can, but it's kind of draining your battery while you do that, right? And if you already have like a chronic stress thing going on, like a high level baseline anxiety, like how long can you do that for before you're just totally burned out? And that's what happened to me. Like the Tony Robbins hype up stuff, I think accelerated the burnout I was already headed towards. Because I was, I can still hype myself up like I demonstrated a couple minutes ago. But I don't do that. I had to train myself to stop doing that actually when I was doing it a lot from Tony Robbins stuff. Because it was burning me out faster. That's why I say caffeine is my favorite drug, because it helps you burn yourself out faster.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
I do love caffeine, but I try to actually keep my intake pretty low.
Yeah, I need to cut back a little bit.
Yeah. So when we're trying to push and force our way through life, like again, it's not that we can't do that, but man, it's not fun or enjoyable. It's just like a stressful way of being. It's like what you're talking about. Like if we can balance things out more, we can still push and force or call upon that reserve of energy in emergency. It's just hopefully we're not running our entire life in emergency mode. The alarms going off and like freaking out all the time. A lot of what I help people to do is to learn a new way of doing things out of enjoyment, out of ease and enjoyment, which, there's often beliefs about that though. Like, oh, I can't enjoy this, or it's not okay if this feels good. It's not okay if I get paid for things I like to do. Like, there's all these strange beliefs we have from society. Or there might be some weird thing you want to do. Maybe you want to create a breathing app for people, but you're like, no, I need a normal job, right? Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you nailed that one. But,
yeah. So as creative people, like we have something we want to do that's maybe a little different, but we've got all these beliefs inside of like, it's not okay to do something that's not normal.
Yeah. So one thing I was wondering is, so NLP, it kind of goes hand in hand with hypnosis. And so when you're helping someone with hypnosis, is like, I've done like Marissa Peer and some of these little more well-known hypnotists.
Yeah.
And I found it to be helpful. But I was wondering, with the way you work with people, do you give them like an audio recording that they listen to every day, and like what's the protocol for once you start using hypnosis?
Great question. There are a lot of hypnotists who have protocols, and protocols are something that is a hot topic in hypnosis. Actually, it's like, should you use a protocol or not? The interesting thing is, I have asked other hypnotists. I go to a hypnosis conference each year. I used to before the pandemic in Las Vegas, called Hypnothoughts Live. It's the biggest hypnosis conference in the world. About 1,000 people. I usually teach something there, and then but I love to talk with the hypnotists about what they do. And some people do have protocols. A lot of people, they like to sell other hypnotists on their protocol, part of their business model. There's nothing wrong with that, but the problem with it, I find with a protocol is it works for X percentage of people, whatever that is. It could be a really good one would be like 80% of people with a specific problem. And a lot of them aren't even that effective, maybe 50% of people, right? So some range. That's pretty good. I'm not saying that's bad. But then what happens with those other 20% of people? Like, I've been the 20% a lot of times. I've tried the thing that people are like, this works with 90% of people. It doesn't work for me. It's like, well, shit, I really went for it. And I spent $10,000 on this or whatever, and it didn't work for me. Like, I'm bummed. And so a lot of what I do is actually more custom. It's more custom to the individual. At least when I'm working one-on-one. I do sell some stuff that's more generic or have some, scripted hypnosis on YouTube. Again, it only works for 80% of people or 50% of people or whatever. That's great for the people it works with, because they can just listen to a free hypnosis or buy a $10 hypnosis or whatever and get some results. But my one-on-one is more custom. It's like, let's figure out the exact structure of what's going on in your brain and your imagination, and then, create a creative solution for you. And I find that my clients are pretty happy with that overall, and that really ends up solving the problem rather than just, porting over a protocol. Now, I do have techniques that I use, of course. I use core transformation. I use very specific techniques from hypnosis. I have things that I've made myself that have step-by-step. So it's not bad to have a technique or a recipe or something like that. It's more like, if you're in the kitchen and you got a recipe, do you have to follow the recipe exactly, or can you improvise because you've got some, other knowledge of cooking, and you're like, oh, I don't have that ingredient, or I'd like to just try something new here. I know that Jane doesn't like spicy, so I'm going to do something else, And so it's more like, that's how I'm working these days, is creating custom approaches, almost design solutions for the individual in the session in real time. And that to me is the most fun way to work too, because it's just it's a creative, dynamic, a jazz composition that's emerging as we talk. So yeah.
And so like, one thing that's coming to mind, and this is kind of do you ever see the movie Office Space?
Oh, I love Office Space, yeah.
And so I've always thought that movie is, it's actually about that he was super stressed and depressed in the beginning, and then he gets that hypnotherapy session.
Yeah.
And everything changes for him. He's like not worried about his job anymore. There's all those layoffs going on, and he doesn't care at all.
Yeah.
And that was with just one, and this is a movie, of course, but in just one session, he made this massive transformation.
Totally.
And do you find that hypnosis has that effect where in one session, or is it more of a daily thing that someone needs to do? Again,
a fantastic question. So I won't say that doesn't happen sometimes. Not exactly as in the movie, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
There's a funny premise. Sometimes there are one session miracles. In fact, I used to normally coach that way. I would just be like, okay, yeah, let's try to solve the problem today. It's not that you can't do that sometimes. Like, what it is more like leverage, though. It's like, if we can find the leverage point and kick that off, everything starts going in the right direction. You know, like if you imagine you're driving a car 80 miles an hour down the highway and you're going the wrong way, you know, like what a great coaching session can do is say, turn around and go the other way 80 miles an hour. You know, so that could change your whole life, could turn everything around, but you're not there yet. Right? You're not at your destination. And so ongoing coaching or hypnosis can also be helpful because there can be twists and turns along the path and obstacles to overcome and so on. You know, so I used to do that. Yeah, try to do NLP sessions or just cure it right away. It's not that I don't try to do that now. But one thing I noticed is that like a client will come in, for instance, with procrastination. It's a real common one. Someone will come on and be like, I'm procrastinating to do this major project or everything in my life. And we'll talk about it. And they'll be like, you know what? I think, you know, the client will say, I think the problem is I'm not harsh enough with myself. I need a harsher taskmaster, you know, and you know, to beat myself up more, maybe meaner to myself. They don't say exactly like that, but and from my perspective, of course, that is the cause of the problem. Being mean to yourself when you fail or when you don't do what you intend to do, then creates this polarity where you have an authority figure in your mind. It's like, you gotta fucking do this thing, you asshole, you know. And then you have this other part of you that's like, you can't tell me what to do, me, right? And you have this this conflict here between two parts of yourself that gets very intense the harsher you punish yourself. So to me, the solution is self-compassion. That's not something you're going to learn overnight, right? Like I could tell somebody that, they're going to be like, whatever, dismiss it, right? So I get them somehow to realize that's the solution. And then they can start on the journey to learning self-compassion. You turn their car around, stop punishing themselves, go in the other direction. And it might take years to really learn that skill. So yeah, there's things I can do in one session that can be magical sometimes. Not every session's that way. And you might not get to your destination in an hour or an hour and a half, you know? But sometimes, like for instance, if someone comes in with anxiety, I'm excited. Like, yeah, because I know in that session, we're going to figure out 0 to 10, how high is it? And it's going to go down multiple points right there and then, because I have the tools to do that. And that's exciting to me because, you know, for 25 years, or maybe 20 of those 25 years, I had no way to do that for myself. But I can show people how to do that in 20 or 30 minutes, which is pretty cool. That doesn't mean you're going to be anxiety free for the rest of your life in 20 or 30 minutes like that. No, and you're going in the right direction now, though. So yeah, so there are definitely hypnotists who promise one session miracles. I don't do that anymore because it's complex.
Yeah.
And I actually prefer to work with people as an ongoing support. So I price myself accordingly too. Like a lot of hypnotists will charge, you know, so much money per session. But I try to price it a little bit more reasonably so that people could, if they want, get ongoing support month after month. Yeah.
Well, it sounds really much more realistic, and it's, you know, it's definitely the experience I've had where there's definitely moments or there's been different techniques I've learned that made a huge difference immediately.
Yeah.
But it still took a lot of work over a long period of time to make like a more lasting change, probably.
Totally.
But yeah, those things for anxiety, like if you don't know, for someone who doesn't know any anxiety relief techniques,
which is most people.
Yeah, which is most people. Just learning anything, any kind of like imagining your legs are heavy like concrete blocks, or, you know, there's tons of these really simple techniques that I know a lot of hypnosis techniques use.
Yeah. Or some breathing techniques, maybe in an app. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe maybe you can, you know, if you want to go download a free breathing app called Pocket Breath Coach, we'll put the link down below.
Awesome.
Now, if somebody wants to work with you, or I know you've got some free trainings online, where can they find you?
Yeah, if you go over to boulderhypnosisworks.com, that's Boulder as in Boulder, Colorado, BOULDER, boulderhypnosisworks.com. Got some free stuff there on resilience and some other videos of me talking about things that might be of interest. A few things for sale. And then I also have a group coaching that I started just in 2013 this year. We meet every Sunday for an hour. And the whole point of that group is to be a safe place to try new things and fail. Because when we're growing as human beings, when we're trying new things, or especially trying to overcoming productivity problems, some of the things we're going to try aren't going to work. Lots of them, and that's okay. But for the most part, we have incredible fear of failure. We don't want to try new things. So we've structured the group to train you in enjoying failure, even, and trying new things, running experiments, focusing on the positive, the things that are working. And then about half the class, we learn some new concepts. So lots of people are enjoying that. And then I also do one-on-one, of course, nice 90-minute long hypnosis sessions and coaching where we get into the details.
Well, that sounds really cool. I'll put a link to your website down below. And if anyone wants to check out Duff, I recommend it.
Awesome.
So anything else you want to share before we finish up here?
No, this was great. Thanks for having me on your show here, Luke.
Yeah, thank
great
you.
To connect.
This was really fun. I learned a lot.